Take your seats. We're about to take off. Thank you. Buckle. Is Betty Davis? Do you know what Betty Davis said?
Of course.
What did she say? What's the Betty Davis quote?
Take your seat.
Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy night. Yes. Come on. If you can't quote Betty Davis, don't show up at the briefing. Yeah. Yeah, I know, exactly. Not like us. Yes, exactly. All right. Good afternoon. Nikolai Mladenov, the special coordinator for the Middle East peace process, warned the Security Council this morning that Gaza is imploding. In a intervention via video conference, he noted that the World Bank recently said that the Gazan economy is in a free fall with an official unemployment rate of 53% and over 70% amongst Palestinian youth. Every second person in Gaza now lives below the poverty line. At the same time, he said there's a growing consensus and determination among key international and regional partners on moving forward to defuse the powder keg that is Gaza. He said the humanitarian efforts there are taking place in coordination with and the support of the Egyptian efforts to bring Gaza back under the full control of the legitimate Palestinian government. He added the government's return to Gaza and the lifting of the suffocating movements and access restrictions are necessary for addressing the humanitarian economic needs of the population in a sustainable manner. Mr. Mladenov also said that the violence is on the rise and that Israeli authorities have continued the demolition and confiscation of Palestinian-owned structure in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. He once called on Israel to cease demolitions and other measures that run contrary to the obligations under international law. And he noted the recent killings of 2 Israelis and 1 Palestinian in the West Bank, which he condemned in the strongest terms, while calling on everyone to stand up to violence and condemn terrorism. And turning to Syria, today the UN and the Syrian Arab Red Crescent delivered food and wheat and flour to 13,500 women and children and men in al-Lajat in southern Syria. This is the second such convoy to the area this week. 2 days ago, the UN and the Red Crescent delivered food and wheat flour for 14,000 people in need. Between July and September, the UN provided food aid for more than 630,000 people in the south of Syria, mostly delivering through the Red Crescent. The UN continues to call on all parties to allow for the safe, sustained, and unimpeded access to all people in need in line with their obligations under international humanitarian law. And a new UN report has documented the immense suffering of civilians in South Sudan's western equatorial region, where 900 people were abducted and 24,000 forced to flee their homes during the surge of violence between April and August of this year. The report, jointly published by the UN Peacekeeping Mission and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, notes that starting in April, the Sudan Liberation Army in opposition and the Sudan People's Liberation Army engaged in attacks that resulted to harm of civilians. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, called for the release of the abducted civilians and said it was essential for the government of South Sudan to hold the perpetrators to account. For his part, David Shearer, the special representative of the Secretary-General for South Sudan, said the country's new peace agreement puts the onus on the warring parties to ensure that no atrocities are committed in the future. And yesterday, the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, announced that a decision had been taken not to declare the ongoing Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo a public health emergency of international concern. The decision was taken during a meeting of the International Health Regulation Emergency Committee. The committee also expressed concern about the outbreak and emphasized the need for the response to be intensified, and they highlighted the risk that the outbreak could spread to neighboring countries remains very high. It added that resources are needed to be made available immediately for the ongoing response and for preparedness in surrounding provinces and countries. And after you're done with me, you will hear from Monica on behalf of the President of the General Assembly, and then our guests will be Biense Gawanas, the Special Advisor on Africa, along with Ibrahim Mayaki, the Chief Executive Officer of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, otherwise known as NEPAD. They will brief you on the Africa Dialogue series, which is currently taking place. And at 1:15, there'll be a briefing by Suella Janina, Chair of the Committee on Enforced Disappearances, and Bernard Duhaine, Chair of the Working Group on Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances. And tomorrow at 11 o'clock, Felipe González Morales, the Special Rapporteur on the human rights of migrants, will be here to answer your questions.
Hi, Steph. Anka has just hosted a press conference with the Committee to Protect Journalists, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Reporters Without Borders, where they all collectively called for Turkey to request the Secretary-General to appoint an independent panel of investigators to probe the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey. Would the Secretary-General be open to such a request, premised on similar investigation appointed by Ban Ki-moon into the assassination of Benazir Bhutto?
Okay, a couple of points to make. One, the Secretary-General has repeatedly called for the truth to come out in this situation, that he remains very concerned about the fate of Mr. Khashoggi. We understand there are a number of investigations, investigation led by Turkey underway. So that's the first focus. The call from Human Rights Watch was made to the government of Turkey, so I can't answer for them. As a matter of principle, the Secretary-General can initiate an investigation if all the parties involved request it, or if there's a legislative mandate from a UN body. So we're a little removed right now in terms of hypotheses. We'll obviously follow this situation, but for the Secretary-General, it's very important that the truth come out.
You are correct that there have been calls for a credible investigation, but given the two countries involved here and their record of treatment of journalists, it's Turkey, which is listed by CPJ as one of the worst abusers of journalists in the world, and Saudi Arabia, and I think that speaks for itself. Does the Secretary-General have confidence that these two governments can lead a credible and independent investigation that will, at the end, deliver the facts?
Before we answer that question, I think we need to let the initial investigation play out. Edie.
Point of clarification. If Turkey called for an investigation, asked the Secretary-General to launch an investigation, and Saudi Arabia didn't go along, could the Secretary-General in that case still launch an investigation?
All right, we're getting into a hypothetical zone that my boss doesn't like me to. Let me try to please you and my boss as well, maybe in a reverse order. In terms of hypotheticals, we'll remove the countries involved. Obviously, legislative mandate. If there's a request by a country for the Secretary-General to launch an investigation to something that happened in their country, the Secretary-General could do that. Obviously, there is also. So we'll leave it at that. But I think we're still we are waiting. We're waiting to see what the initial results are. James,
you say it's hypothetical, but clearly, if the Secretary-General got that request, it's something he would need to move on quickly, and you would have to do.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying, he would have, if he got that request, he would have to take that request under advisement.
But also, you'd want to move quite fast. Is there any preparatory work being done at this stage?
I think we need to take things one step at a time. Errol.
Yes, just follow up, obviously, on this topic. You mentioned legislative mandate. What about moral authority? Those three organizations in Ankara called upon Secretary-General to lead, to exercise his supreme moral authority, and to ask this investigation not to be whitewashed either by Turkey or by Washington or any other states.
I would refer you to what the Secretary-General, I think, said to the BBC in Indonesia, where he said, I think, first of all, we need to have a strong request for the truth. To be clear, we need to know exactly what has happened, and we need to know who is responsible for it. So there is an investigation going on. The UN is an organization of rules and regulations, and obviously any investigation needs to have the cooperation of the parties.
But follow up, please. Are you afraid that while taking that time, needed time, obviously, for rules and obligations, things could be really whitewashed? It's not a matter of being
afraid or not afraid. It's a matter of calling for the truth to come out. and taking things one step at a time.
Did the Secretary General talk to any time soon or recently with Washington, Riyadh, or Ankara?
There have been discussions had with both the Turkish authorities and the Saudi authorities. Stefano.
Yes, speaking with the Sharon Tadros of the Amnesty International that just was there on the press conference, I asked if in a situation like this, if the organization in approaching the UN had problem or more obstacles when has to do with Saudi Arabia. This was asked after the press conference because there was no time, but she answered me and said, I talked this during the press conference. Yes, of course, when it's with Saudi Arabia, other United Nations, there are much more obstacles. Reason, money. Means there is a major contributor.
I'm glad, what's the Q&A? There was a Q&A with those people.
No.
What's your question to me?
So it comes with a question. If not, the people will not know what I'm asking for.
We're pretty informed
with
here,
the Guterres, we know that this happened actually in the past, with, for example, with Ban Ki-moon. But with the Guterres administration, is this happening when it's to do with Saudi Arabia? Maybe things are taken more casually. I mean, caution is more.
There are 193 member states in this organization, all with rights and responsibilities. The Secretary General speaks out when he needs to speak out, and I would refer you to the past statements he's made on the issue that you've raised. Abdelhamid.
Follow up with the same question. So you said the SG can send an investigation team in two cases. If he is mandated by the Security Council, for example, or requested by a member state. Is there another third option when the SG himself initiates an investigation mission due to the moral authority he has or due to the brutality of the crime or war crimes or
I will leave the answer to what I've already said. For investigations to be useful and to be productive, they need the cooperation of the parties involved. Madame.
Hello, from the Portuguese news agency. I wanted to ask, how's the mission of peacekeeping for the Central African Republic? Yesterday, the Security Council had another meeting, and we know that MINUSCA is almost ending its mandate in November. So I would like to know how is it for the Central African Republic and for the countries like Portugal that have their militaries there.
We would expect the mandate of the mission to be renewed. Yes, sir.
This is a question, so you can. I think you will like it. You will like it. Does the Secretary General thinks that we journalists should put this, fuss and this energy also when he's not a journalist involved?
It is really not to him or to me to tell you how to do your job. On that note, I will leave Monica to do her job and answer your questions. And then we'll have our guests, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will be brief.
Sorry.
I will be brief. Thank you very much, Stéphane, and good afternoon, everybody.